December 8, 1980, 10:50 p.m. New York City. John Lennon steps out of his limousine. He's holding cassette tapes. A man stands in the shadows. He pulls a gun. 5 shots tear through the night. Blood splatters across the pavement. John falls. That man had asked for an autograph just hours earlier. And now, he's silent. He doesn't run. Yoko Ono screams. A doorman cries, "He's been shot." Police rush in. Crowds gather. The radio confirms it. John Lennon is dead. This wasn't just a murder. It was the day the music, and something more, died. Subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because what you're about to hear isn't fiction. December 8, 1980, 5 p.m., The Dakota, New York City, USA. It was a crisp winter afternoon. The sun dipped behind Manhattan's skyline as holiday lights twinkled across Central Park West. Outside the historic Dakota apartment building, a small group of fans lingered quietly, hoping for one moment, one glimpse. At 5 p.m., John Lennon stepped outside the heavy iron gates. He smiled. He wore a black leather jacket, round-tinted glasses, and a calm, content look on his face. At his side, Yoko Ono, serene as always. A man emerged from the crowd. Shaky hands. Blank stare. A vinyl copy of Double Fantasy in his grip. He asked John for an autograph. John paused. Smiled again. He signed the record. That man was Mark David Chapman. 6 hours later, he would shoot John Lennon 5 times in the back. But no one knew. Not yet. He was more than a singer. Born on October 9, 1940, in war-torn Liverpool, England, John was raised by his Aunt Mimi after his parents separated. As a boy, he was sarcastic, brilliant, and wounded by abandonment. At 16, he formed a skiffle band. By 23, he was a Beatle. He and Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr became the most famous music group in the world. But John wanted more than fame. He wanted truth. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, John devoted himself to activism, peace protests, music about love, pain, and politics. And most of all, Yoko Ono. He called her his other half, his muse, his mind. They moved into the Dakota on 72nd Street, an elegant, Gothic building overlooking Central Park. It was meant to be a sanctuary. Instead, it became the scene of his murder. Mark David Chapman was into Monster. Not at first glance. Born May 10, 1955, in Fort Worth, Texas, Chapman grew up in a strict, turbulent home. His father was cold. His mother tried to hold the family together. Mark felt invisible. He loved the Beatles. As a teen, he played guitar. He listened to Imagine on repeat. But as he grew older, his obsession with Lennon turned. He began to see John not as a hero, but as a liar. In Chapman's twisted mind, John had betrayed his own message of peace, of love, of giving up possessions. How could a man who sang Imagine No Possessions live in a multi-million-dollar apartment? Chapman saw hypocrisy, and he couldn't let it go. December 8, 1980, morning, Honolulu, Hawaii. Mark David Chapman kissed his wife goodbye. He flew from Honolulu to New York with a .38 caliber revolver and a paperback copy of The Catcher in the Rye in his suitcase. He was calm, quiet, polite. He checked into the Sheraton Hotel. He wandered through the city, bought a copy of Double Fantasy, and walked to the Dakota. By 10 a.m., he was waiting outside the building. One of John's fans. Smiling. Patient. No one noticed the gun in his coat. 5 p.m. John and Yoko stepped out of the Dakota. They were headed to the Record Plant studio to work on a new track, Walking on Thin Ice. Mark stepped forward. He handed John the album. John signed it with a blue pen. Looked at him. Said nothing else. A photographer captured the moment. That photo still exists, John signing an album for the man who would kill him. Chapman didn't pull the trigger then. He stepped back. Watched them leave. He waited. Record Plant Studio, Midtown Manhattan. John and Yoko spent 5 peaceful hours in the studio. They laughed. They danced to playback. They discussed a future tour. John looked healthy, happy, hopeful. "I feel like it's just beginning again," he told the sound engineer. He carried cassette tapes of the night's session. At 10:30 p.m., they headed home. The limousine pulled up in front of the Dakota just before 10:50 p.m. The sidewalk was quiet. The sky was dark. And Mark David Chapman was still standing there. 10:50 p.m. John stepped out of the car first. Yoko walked ahead toward the archway entrance. Chapman emerged from the shadows. He raised the .38 and fired 5 hollow point bullets into John's back and shoulder. John stumbled forward. He made it through the archway, collapsed onto the floor. Blood pooled beneath him. Yoko screamed. A doorman called for help. Chapman didn't run. He dropped his gun and began reading The Catcher in the Rye. Officers James Moran and Bill Gamble were the first on the scene. They saw John's eyes still open, still breathing. Barely. There was no time for an ambulance. They placed him in the back of their squad car and drove at full speed to Roosevelt Hospital. John was bleeding out. In the back seat, he whispered one word. "Help." 11:07 p.m. John Lennon was pronounced dead at Roosevelt Hospital. His chest had been shattered. His left lung destroyed. Doctors tried everything. But it was too late. Yoko was told the news in a small hospital room. She collapsed to the floor and whispered, "Tell Sean. His father loved him. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home." December 8, 1980, 11:30 p.m. New York was still awake. People were finishing dinner. Cabs still honked. The city still breathed. But inside Roosevelt Hospital, time stopped. A nurse made the call to the newswire. John Lennon is dead. Radio stations paused their music. At 11:50 p.m., WABC broke in with, "We interrupt this program with breaking news. John Lennon, former Beatle, has been shot and killed." Some thought it was a joke. It wasn't. By midnight, it was everywhere. TV anchors tried to hold back tears. Fans ran through the streets screaming. Phones rang across the globe. In London, it was already morning. Paul McCartney was told while leaving a recording session. He shook his head and muttered, "It's a drag, man." People criticized him for sounding cold. But later, Paul explained, "I couldn't speak. I didn't want to break down on camera." At the crime scene, Mark David Chapman sat quietly on the sidewalk. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't try to run. Police handcuffed him and asked why he did it. He said, "Because I wanted to be somebody." They found his copy of The Catcher in the Rye. On the inside cover, he had written, "This is my statement." Signed, Holden Caulfield, the book's main character. Chapman believed Lennon had become a phony. In his twisted mind, the killing made him real. At 11:20 p.m., Yoko Ono stood alone in the hospital hallway. A doctor came out with tears in his eyes. He simply said, "We did everything we could." She fell to her knees. She refused to believe it. She begged them to try again. She kept asking, "How do I tell Sean?" Sean Lennon was only 5 years old. He had just kissed his father goodnight. By 1 a.m., thousands had gathered outside the Dakota. They brought candles, flowers, handwritten letters. People cried openly. Strangers hugged. Some played Beatles songs on guitars. No one told them to come. They just knew. One man whispered, "I don't believe in God, but I believed in John." Radio stations did something they rarely did. They stopped broadcasting. Some aired silence. Others played Imagine on repeat. DJs cried on live air. News anchors struggled to find words. At 3 a.m., Howard Cosell replayed the moment he'd announced the death live on Monday Night Football, breaking the news during the game. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but John Lennon, formerly of the Beatles, has been shot." It was the first time millions heard it. Chapman was taken to Bellevue Hospital for a mental evaluation. He showed no emotion, no regret, no confusion. Psychiatrists asked if he understood what he had done. He answered, "Yes. I killed John Lennon." He described his plan in calm, cold detail. He had waited all day, he said. "It was like a movie. I watched myself do it." Some doctors called him schizophrenic. Others said it was narcissistic delusion. One wrote, "He's not insane. He's just empty." Yoko refused a public funeral. Instead, she asked the world for 10 minutes of silence. She scattered John's ashes in Central Park. No gravesite. No ceremony. No camera crews. On December 14, 1980, at 2 p.m., millions across the globe stood still. In London, Tokyo, Sydney, New York, even Times Square went quiet. In 1985, a portion of Central Park was named Strawberry Fields. A circular mosaic reads, "Imagine. Every day, people bring flowers. Photos. Tears. It has no guards. No ropes. It's open to everyone, the way John would have wanted." The official cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds to the back and shoulder. Fatal internal bleeding. Pronounced dead at 11:07 p.m. The revolver was a .38 special. Chapman used hollow point bullets, made to expand on impact. He had purchased them legally in Hawaii. He had no prior arrests. One officer said. There was nothing to suggest he would do this. No warning signs. He was invisible, until he wasn't. In the weeks that followed, Yoko gave only one statement. "I have lost my best friend. The world has lost someone who gave it hope. But his spirit is still here. His words live on." Paul McCartney refused most interviews. George Harrison said, "After all he gave the world, he should have been allowed to grow old." Ringo Starr flew to New York the next day. He sat with Yoko and Sean in silence. He later told a reporter, "We just held hands. There wasn't much to say." Across America, Lennon's murder sparked massive outrage. Some blamed gun laws. Others blamed fame. A few tried to blame Yoko. But most just mourned. Young people cried in the streets. Older fans replayed old Beatles albums and remembered where they were the first time they heard Hey Jude. At Harvard, someone spray-painted a wall with, "You may say I'm a dreamer. But the world just killed the dream." This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. Every quote, every scene, every moment, happened. It's all public record. Subscribe to @Unbelievable True Story if you are ready to hear the darkest truths in sight. June 1981, New York Criminal Court. The world waited for a dramatic trial. They wanted answers. A motive. A reckoning. But they got none of that. Mark David Chapman shocked everyone when he told the judge, "I plead guilty." His lawyer objected. Psychiatrists swore he was mentally ill. But Chapman stood firm. He said, "God told me to do it. I did it. I don't deserve a trial." Judge Dennis Edwards had a choice to make. He could reject the plea and force a trial. Or he could accept Chapman's words, and end it. After a review, the court agreed Chapman was competent. Not insane under the law. On August 24, 1981, he was sentenced. 20 years to life. The courtroom sat in silence. Chapman showed no emotion. He simply asked the guard, "Can I keep my Bible?" Chapman was sent to Attica Correctional Facility. He was 26 years old. Inmates called him Lennon Killer. Some wanted to hurt him. Others just stared. He was placed in protective custody, locked in a small cell for 23 hours a day. He spent his time reading, writing letters, and repeating the same words. "I'm sorry. But I had to do it." To this day, he's been denied parole 12 times. Experts still debate it. Chapman was obsessed with The Catcher in the Rye, a story about a young man who hates phonies. He began to see John Lennon as a phony, someone who sang about peace but lived in luxury. One psychiatrist wrote, "Chapman killed John Lennon to kill the lie he thought Lennon represented." Another theory? He wanted to be famous. Chapman once told a guard, "I knew if I killed him, people would know my name." As Chapman vanished into prison, John Lennon became even larger than life. Sales of Double Fantasy skyrocketed. Beatles albums re-entered the charts. Millions of people, some too young to know the Beatles, discovered his music. His voice echoed in subways, in protests, in schools. Give peace a chance. Imagine. His message survived his death. Yoko Ono took months to speak publicly again. But when she did, her voice was clear. We will not let hate win. John's voice will not be silenced. She became more involved in activism. She spoke about gun violence. She funded art projects for peace. She created the John Lennon Educational Tour bus, giving young people the tools to make music and film. She once said, "If I don't carry his message, who will?" Sean Lennon was just 5 years old when his father died. He was shielded from the cameras. Yoko kept him out of public view. But in later interviews, Sean said, "For years, I didn't understand why people cried when they saw me. Then I realized. I reminded them of him." He followed in his father's footsteps. He became a musician. Quiet, thoughtful, gifted, but also burdened. He once said, "Every song I write, I wonder if he would have liked it." In the early 1980s, America was seeing more high-profile murders. Reagan had been shot, and survived. John Lennon had not. Activists pushed harder for gun reform. People asked, how did a man with mental illness get a gun so easily? The answer was uncomfortable. He just walked into a store in Hawaii, filled out a form, paid in cash, and got bullets, too. No background checks. No red flags. In 1981, there were few national laws about background checks. Gun sales were mostly state-regulated. Chapman had no felony history. No hospital records. Nothing that triggered an alert. He passed the check. That loophole helped him end a life. In later years, politicians cited Lennon's murder during debates over gun reform. But change came slowly. Yoko channeled her sorrow into creation. She produced installations titled, "War is Over, If You Want It, My Mommy is Beautiful." Wish Tree. In every exhibit, John's spirit lingered. Visitors wrote messages, hung notes on trees, stared into mirrors with his lyrics etched in the glass. She turned mourning into meaning. What would you do in that moment? Would you see the warning signs? Could anyone have stopped it? This isn't fiction. It's a verified, public tragedy that changed music history forever. Subscribe to @Unbelievable True Story to uncover the full picture, and the darker truths still hiding behind headlines. In interviews, fans and friends ask the same question. What would John Lennon have done if he lived? Some say he would have reunited with Paul McCartney. Some say he would have gone deeper into politics. Others think he might have walked away from music entirely. But in one of his last interviews, just days before his death, John said, "I feel like I've just started again. I want to make music for another 40 years. He was only 40. And he was just beginning. John's songs weren't just music. They were movements. Give Peace a Chance was sung at protests. Imagine became an anthem in schools and sports arenas. Working Class Hero became the rallying cry for the poor. Even after death, John's voice marched on. His words were printed on protest signs. His face appeared on murals in Belfast, Berlin, and Brooklyn. A man once said, "We didn't just lose a singer. We lost a light." Mark David Chapman is still in prison. Every 2 years, he becomes eligible for parole. Every 2 years, it is denied. In his last hearing, he said, "I'm sorry. I think about it every day. I knew what I did was wrong. But I did it anyway," the parole board replied. "Your release would so greatly undermine respect for the law that it cannot be justified." Yoko has written letters asking them to keep him inside. She once said, "If he gets out, I am not safe. And neither is Sean." In Central Park, just across from the Dakota, lies a quiet memorial. A circular mosaic. One word at the center. Imagine. Tourists visit daily. Some bring flowers. Others sit in silence. Musicians play soft covers of Beatles songs. Children walk through not knowing the story, but feeling the calm. It's one of the most visited spots in New York City. Not because of how John died, but because of how he lived. Years after John's death, Yoko began releasing unreleased recordings. Some were raw demos. Some were spoken word. Some were love songs written only for her. In one of the tapes, John whispers, "It's not over. I'm still here. I'm just making a new kind of song." It gave fans chills. Many believe his spirit never left. In 2001, after 9/11, people gathered in Times Square and sang Imagine. In 2020, during the pandemic, people sang Imagine from balconies in Spain and Italy. In protests around the world, Black Lives Matter, anti-war marches, climate rallies, John's voice plays from loudspeakers. His music doesn't fade. It changes shape. One protester held a sign. "You may say I'm a dreamer. But I'm not the only one." John Lennon became more than a musician. He became an idea. An idea of hope. An idea of peace. An idea that music can change the world. But also, he became a symbol of what happens when hatred wins. When one man's madness can silence a voice meant for millions. Yoko once said she believes John knew he wouldn't grow old. In his later songs, there's a kind of goodbye. In Watching the Wheels, he sings, "I'm just sitting here watching the wheels go round and round. I really love to watch them roll." And in Beautiful Boy, written for Sean, he sings, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." Those lyrics now sound like prophecy. Let's pause. Here's what's 100% real. The time of the shooting, December 8, 1980, 10:50 p.m. The weapon, Charter Arms 38 Special. The motive, a mixture of obsession, jealousy, and delusion. The aftermath, no trial. A guilty plea. Life in prison. The legacy, a global day of mourning. An immortal voice in music. All these facts come from court transcripts, police reports, and news interviews. You can verify every one yourself. This is not fiction. This isn't just a story for shock or entertainment. Every moment happened. Every tear was real. Every life changed forever. John Lennon was a father, a husband, a dreamer. And his story reminds us what hate can destroy. But also, what love can survive. Stick with us. In Part 5, we'll end this story with one final emotional twist. We'll revisit the last words Lennon ever said. The haunting question of why this happened at all. And the chilling silence that followed. If you've ever believed in peace, or lost someone too soon, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because some voices still echo, long after they're gone. December 8, 1980. John Lennon woke up early. He kissed Yoko. He had tea. He wrote in his journal. It was a normal day. They spent the morning at the Dakota. A photographer arrived to capture them for Rolling Stone. That afternoon, they walked to the record plant to mix the new song Walking on Thin Ice. They smiled. They laughed. They talked about going to dinner. Nothing felt strange. Nothing warned them. Around 5 p.m., a man waited outside the Dakota. He held a record. It was Double Fantasy. He asked John for an autograph. John said, "Sure. No problem." He signed it. A photographer captured the moment. That man holding the record was Mark David Chapman. He got what he came for, and stayed behind. That photo would become one of the most chilling images in music history. At 10:30 p.m., John and Yoko left the studio. They were happy. The song was finished. Yoko told him, "This is your best work yet." John leaned over and kissed her. They got into their limo. Yoko said later, "I had no idea it would be the last time he ever smiled at me." The car pulled up to the building. The sidewalk was quiet. It was cold. Peaceful. Yoko walked ahead. John followed. Then, out of the shadows, a voice called, "Mr. Lennon?" John turned. Mark David Chapman stepped forward. He pulled the revolver from his coat. He fired 5 times. 4 bullets hit John in the back and shoulder. Blood splattered across the brick. John stumbled up the steps. He cried out, "I've been shot!" Yoko screamed. A doorman rushed forward. Chapman stood still. Then dropped the gun. The doorman shouted, "Call an ambulance." But there was no time. John was bleeding out fast. A police cruiser arrived. 2 officers lifted him into the back seat. Yoko held his hand. She whispered, "Stay with me. Stay with me." But John didn't speak again. At 11:07 p.m., doctors pronounced him dead. We may never know what John's true final words were. But the doorman said John muttered, "Help me." Others say he never spoke at all. But one thing is certain. The silence that followed was louder than anything he'd ever sung. Radio stations broke the news. TV anchors cried. The New York Times ran the black border. In Liverpool, fans held a candlelight march through the same streets where the Beatles once walked. In Japan, people gathered outside the U.S. Embassy. In Argentina, fans held up peace signs in a football stadium and chanted, "John Lennon vive! John Lennon lives!" He is now 69 years old. Still behind bars. His wife has stayed with him. She visits once a year. He reads the Bible every day. He paints. He prays. But he has never been forgiven. Not by Yoko. Not by Sean. Not by the world. In his 2022 parole hearing, he said, "I was seeking glory. I thought it would bring me peace. But it brought me nothing." Sean Lennon now walks in his father's shadow. He writes music. Soft. Introspective. Haunting. In one of his songs, he sings, "You left your shoes beside the bed. But I can't fill them." Julian Lennon, John's son from his first marriage, also became a singer. He once said, "I didn't just lose a father. I lost the chance to know him." Why did it happen? Why John? Why then? Some blame fame. Others blame mental illness. Some blame America's obsession with guns. But maybe there is no clean answer. Only a question. How can one man's hatred undo a lifetime of love? John Lennon didn't want to be a hero. He didn't want statues. He just wanted to create. He once said, "If I've touched someone, even one person, I've done my job." Today, he has touched millions. More than a singer. More than a Beatle. He became a mirror, showing us what the world can be, if we imagine it. Have you heard this story before? Do you remember where you were that night? Or are you just hearing it now? For the first time? Because this is not fiction. It's real. It's public. And it changed the world. If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story. Because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our playlists of true crimes and real mysteries. The next story might hit even closer to home.